Hi, this is Logan with Nas, and today we're going to go through some common questions that we get from people who are shopping for solar. Now, we're always happy to answer any questions you might have on solar ahead of your purchase or during the design phase, but we wanted to go through some of the most frequently asked questions here on this video. So one of the first questions we're going to go through today is whether or not you need an installer. This is definitely something you should be asking ahead of your purchase, and ultimately the answer is it kind of just depends. In a lot of cases, DIY or homeowner direct installations are permitted if you wanted to try and take it on yourself. I would say, especially for a straight grid tie system in a residential area with no battery backup, it's a very simple installation. Usually maybe 70 to 80% of the work doesn't require an extensive electrical background. So that's things like mounting your solar panels, running conduit, pulling wire, maybe mounting some of the equipment, doing a few basic connections. And what a lot of our DIY customer base ends up doing is they will knock out as much of the install that they can on their own, or as much that they're comfortable with. And then they'll call an electrician or a contractor on site to make the final connections with the system and complete the commissioning process to get it up and running. There are some larger all-in-one solar companies that will charge a pretty high price for the installation phase of a project. So it's really important to define how much they are asking for, because again, at times that can be misrepresented or sometimes underplayed in the total proposal. So again, DIY installations are usually acceptable in most cases, and this will be a very cost-effective route to go in terms of saving on that installation cost. However, if you are in need of an installer, let us know. We may be able to connect you with a local installer in your area. Another common question here for us is, do you need a permit? And again, answer on this one kind of depends on the application and what the system involves. Almost all grid connected systems, especially in residential areas, will require a permit. There are instances as well where off-grid or standalone systems also need a permit, although it's a little bit of a higher chance that you may be able to skip that part of the install, especially if you're out in the middle of nowhere. Now, if you do need assistance with the permitting process of a solar project, we can help you generate the plan set, which is essentially the packet of documents that includes the site overview, the layout of the equipment, all of our equipment spec sheets, voltage calculations, conduit sizing, your electrical diagrams. That plan set is usually something that is going to be required as part of the submittal process to get your permit. So you will want to determine early on whether or not you need to pull a permit for your installation, as this does affect the timeline of the project and can also add a slight amount of extra cost. Just be sure to let your applications engineer or designer know you will need permitting assistance while you're speaking with them during the bidding process. Moving through our list of questions here, another one we get a lot is, do you need approval from your utility company to install solar? Now, for all of our off-gridders out there, this question isn't really applicable because an off-grid or a standalone system, there is no connection to the utility grid. So obviously we do not need their approval to install solar. So anytime you have a grid-tied solar system where you're exporting or selling back excess solar production to the grid or to the utility company, you do have to obtain what's called an interconnection agreement. So an interconnection agreement is basically a contract between you and the utility company stating how much solar you're allowed to sell back and what equipment you have installed in your system. Again, we don't need interconnection agreement for off-grid or standalone systems. And another exception there is if your system is connected to the utility grid, but we don't push any power back to the grid. We just pull power from the grid when needed. Most of those instances also don't require an interconnection agreement. We actually have another video that goes into this concept a little bit deeper if you want to take a look. Another question to ask before buying your solar system is, who is your AHJ? Now, AHJ means authority having jurisdiction. And this is not the utility company in most cases, but usually the county, the city, maybe your HOA. Typically it's another organization or group separate from the utility that also requires some sort of a submittal or a permit for you to install your system. I'd like to emphasize again that the AHJ, or authority having jurisdiction, is not the utility company. So even for off-grid systems, standalone systems that don't have a connection to the utility grid, you may still need to pull a permit, and at that point you'd be working with your AHJ. For those of you who are installing a grid-tied system and one that sells or exports energy to the grid, we already know you need an interconnection agreement with the local utility to do that, but you will also need to get the approval from your AHJ. Moving through our list here, another question we get a lot is whether or not your system qualifies for tax credits. Simple answer to that is very likely yes, it will. So the 30% federal residential tax credit is fairly widely applicable. You can even apply that to off-grid standalone systems, even RV systems, boat systems. Again, that's a 30% tax credit that applies to the total cost of what you paid for the system, materials, installation, transport, anything that can be written off in terms of getting that system up and running would qualify for the 30% tax credit. And that was actually just recently extended all the way to 2033. So in addition to the federal tax credit, there are also local incentives or tax credits that you may qualify for as well. You may find other incentives or credits available on a state level, county level, municipal level. I've even heard in some cases of certain utility companies in the US offering some sort of an incentive for you to install solar. The database of state incentives for renewable energy, or DSIRE, is a great resource for you to check out. You can see if there's any other incentives aside from the federal one that may apply to you. We'll drop the link for you here in the description of this video if you want to take a look. Another important question to be asking when you're shopping around for solar is in regards to energy offset. So this one's not as clear-cut as some of our other questions, but this is essentially the goal of the system, or in other words, how much of your home's energy consumption do you want to cover or offset with solar and or batteries? Now again, there's not really an easy answer for this, and this is a purely customer or user preference. So this will depend on the type of system that's being installed, the size of system that's being installed. Do we have grid? Do we have batteries? Maybe what is the cost or the pricing of your electricity from your local utility company? So these are all kind of factors that need to be considered when we think about how much energy do we want to offset. And again, that's basically the goal or the intention of the system. What do we want this equipment or the system to do for us day and night? So some examples there. For an off-grid system, are we just covering loads in a seasonal hunting cabin a couple months out of the year, or is it a full-time off-grid family residence? For those of you who might be doing a grid tie system with sellback, the big question is, how much of your electric bill, how much of that energy do you want to cover with the solar that's generated during the day? For those of us that have grid connected systems, the question is, do we just want the solar to offset our daytime energy usage and we'll continue to buy electricity from the grid at night? Or do we want to include batteries to increase our self-consumption, maybe mitigate time of use or peak demand billing schedules from your utility company? So again, this concept of energy offset, or I think of it as the goal or the intention of the system, not as straightforward and clear-cut as some of our other questions. Our team here at NAS, we can definitely help you work through that a little bit more to help you properly determine what the end goal is for the system. So this next question here really only applies for the grid-tied customers or grid interactive people here, is do you need battery backup? Obviously for the off-gridders, again, our standalone customers out there who don't have the utility grid, most of those systems pretty much all the time require some amount of batteries or storage in some way. So again, this one really just applies to the grid-tied or grid interactive spectrum. So for grid-tied systems or grid interactive systems, this question of battery backup is a very, very hot topic right now, and I think extremely important to consider upfront when you're doing your shopping or doing the bidding process for your equipment. For grid-tied systems that sell back or export their excess solar production to the utility company, battery backup isn't a requirement. However, that system without battery backup will not operate during a grid outage. What that means for you is that anytime the grid fails, even if it's in the middle of the day and all of your solar panels are covered in sun, the entire system has to shut off. Whereas with batteries allow you to keep your system active, to keep the solar panels producing, and supplies backup power to your home during a grid outage. This could be power to just a select few critical loads, maybe your fridge, freezer, lights, internet, your phone, or you could also size it to back up the entire house. And now we're talking larger loads like your kitchen appliances, your furnace, maybe your air conditioners, things like that. Now, providing backup power during a grid outage is not the only thing batteries can do in a grid-tied system. So we can also use our batteries now to shift our reliance or consumption of grid power during times when the electricity is most expensive. So for example, if you're on a time of use billing plan with your electric company, they might charge you a higher price per kilowatt hour. You're paying more for your electricity during a certain period of the day, maybe let's say from 4 to 7 p.m. than you are at other hours of the day. Well, guess what? That 4 to 7 p.m. period for most of us is also when the solar day is wrapping up. So now we have a decreased amount of solar production during the time of the day when grid electricity is most expensive. So you can actually use that excess solar that your system produces during the day to charge batteries. And now you can use those batteries during that peak rate period to reduce or hopefully even eliminate you purchasing that power from the grid at a very expensive rate. So wrapping up here on our list of frequently asked solar questions is, what is the timeline or the schedule for your project? If you do have certain deadlines to meet in your project timeline, be sure you are making your system designer aware of those as early as possible, and that way we can accommodate and make sure we get you the equipment in a timely manner. Now, another thing to keep in mind on the timeline question here is if you need to pull a permit for your system or an interconnection agreement, it's usually best to reserve the equipment before you begin the permitting process. What can happen sometimes is if you have a system designed but it's not yet reserved and you apply for a permit, you submit a plan set to the AHJ or to your utility for the interconnection agreement, you're basing that plan set off of a certain selection of equipment or a design. Depending on how long the permitting process takes, by the time that's done with and approved, maybe you come back and now you're ready to either order the equipment, but certain components might not be available, or maybe there's an extended lead time for something. So now you have your plans and permits already drawn up from the original design. Now we're making a change to accommodate something that's not available. And guess what? Now that means you have to go back to the AHJ, back to your utility company, and resubmit those plans with the current available equipment. So again, based on my personal experience, usually a better option to order and reserve your equipment before you start the permitting process, and that just avoids you having to spend more time with the permitters or doing more corrections later on. We understand that buying solar can be confusing and there are a lot of options out there, but NAS is here to help. When you first contact us, you're working with the same applications engineer or system designer from the initial conversation through the quoting process and design to the sales process and beyond. We have an entire team that knows the PV industry in and out and understands how to design a project to best fit your needs. We also have an entire customer service team dedicated to post-sale support once you do make a purchase from us. Our design team will work with you one-on-one to figure out the best equipment for your application and make sure that system fits in your budget. So no under-designing or overselling, and we don't work on commission. Nas has over 40 years of experience in the solar industry, and we've been helping customers just like you plug into solar since 1979. We'll offer support and troubleshooting for the entire life of your system, and we may even be able to connect you with the local installer. Our team is happy to answer any questions you have about solar. Again, these were just some of the more common ones that we get pretty frequently from people while they're shopping around for equipment. If you have more questions on some of these FAQs or maybe questions that we didn't cover in this video, let us know, give us a call, open up a chat on our website, send us an email, we'll be happy to help. Check out the Learning Center on our website for additional resources on solar, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.